What's up, everybody? If you are just tuning in, this is Cole from the Liberty Revolt, and I just got out of a 2-week mandated quarantine in China's mainland. And what that means is basically they lock me in a hotel room, my wife and I, for 2 weeks. You can't leave. You can't really get your own food. You can't do anything. So you can't see the sun, whatever. And I'm finally out. It's been very interesting because I thought this was going to be COVID hell, that you need a code to get everywhere and everyone was going to be wearing their mask, but things are actually a little bit different. And I'm going to get into that later in the episode. So thanks for tuning in, and got some interesting stuff for you today. An update from being on the ground here, because not many people, not many foreigners are in China right now. So I'm happy to be able to report on that, and more as we get into the episode. So thank you for joining us today. And this is the Liberty Revolt.
LibertyRevoltMedia.com.
What's up, guys?
Everyone?
And we're live. How are you doing today?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Is it glitching out for you guys too?
It's
No.
not, no.
No, it's just you because your internet still sucks. Who knew? Cole, it's good to see you again, bud. It's good to see you alive and well. I take it that you haven't yet achieved your goal of pissing off the Chinese Communist Party enough to come after you.
You know, I haven't done it yet, and I don't see a way that I'm going to. I really thought I was over here and there was going to be nationalism and shit was going to be stoked, and I was going to have like some racism pointed towards me, and people were going to call me a virus, and like everything's the exact same as the last time I was in China. Like there is no difference. No one is like avoiding me on the street. No one is like, oh, you know, America's the worst. I say I'm from the U.S. and people are like, oh, the U.S. Yay.
Here, let me give it to you. You're a disgusting imperialist pig. We detest your presence in our country. I hope you just end up in jail forever. How's that? Does that make up for it?
I've been waiting. I've just been waiting for one person to hurl some of that shit at me, because I really thought it was going to happen. I've been reading all these forums of people who are in China. There's guys like making TikTok videos crying, like, oh, they're so mean to me. They make me go in the back door. I just think it's bullshit at this point, honestly. There's nothing has changed from the last time I was here, except that some people are wearing masks and they don't even enforce the rules. Yeah. They'll be like, put your mask on, and people will just look at them and they won't do it. They'll keep going about their day.
You think that has anything to do with the fact that maybe there's kind of just a lull in the moment? Maybe, things might get a little bit. Is there a chance you think that things will get, the Chinese Communist Party will get a little bit more aggressive with it? Because there might be a portion of it that's down to the fact that the enforcement it's hard to actually enforce on such a widespread level, that maybe they're like kind of focusing in certain areas at different times.
That's the problem, is enforcement, dude, because local government over here is not only corrupt, but like very, very inefficient and very ineffective, and they don't care. Local government doesn't give half a shit about what happens. They really don't. They're there to collect a paycheck, and if it's way too much trouble to try and round people up and stop them doing anything. The police don't have bullets in their guns. Like, the security guys are like 4 feet tall.
What?
And, like,
the police don't have bullets in their guns?
They don't know. No, only the military police have bullets in their guns.
That's very interesting. Why do you think that is? Because you would think that the police, representing the enforcement arm of the government at that communal level, would have the apparatus, that the state would want.
Dude, it's way more hardcore in the U.S. Like, I see a Chinese cop, zero fear, zero reprehension. I could just run away from them and they wouldn't stop me. I'm almost certain they would not stop me. That like this is how China works on a ground level, and it's so funny.
There was
everyone just disrespects them.
Oh.
in Xi'an, which is like kind of middle center. It's the city that has the Terracotta Army, and in the center of one part of the city, they have this 2,000-year-old ancient temple, and none of the buildings around it are allowed to be taller. But they have all these like modern banks and a McDonald's and everything else going around it. But surrounding this temple, you have this like 5-lane roundabout with no lights. And nobody uses turn signals or anything. It's just a complete free-for-all. It's the wild, wild west. And I have said in the past that I think that right there is a perfect metaphor for China more broadly, right? You got high tech, you got
And there he goes. Bye, Bucky.
In many ways backwards, but for the most part, you have so absolute chaos. It's completely the Wild West, and nobody cares.
Do you think that is more down to the fact that they just don't have the apparatus in place to enforce as they would like to? Do you think the government, if they could, they would be enforcing this more stringently?
That's honestly what I wonder about, because the thing is, I think people in China are very, very used to having this sort of free-for-all mentality, and that clamping down a little bit too hard on the ground level would actually make people be like, what the hell is going on? Why are you doing this? What's the point?
Because I'm very curious, because the recent legislation against video game time, basically limiting kids to 3 hours a week, right? That's, that is obviously the kind of penetration you would expect by a communist government into your daily life is, hey, you can only play video games so much because they're toxic. But it's very curious because the Communist Party has a tightrope that they need to walk between having the control that they desire on the people, but at the same time, not pissing off the population to an extent where they start thinking to themselves, maybe the Communist Party isn't the answer.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with something like video games, the only reason they can enforce it is because it's algorithmic, right? Because they're actually relying on giant tech companies who have a profit motive to churn this thing out and sort of enforce it with their algorithm. Now, when you get down to just random enforcements of things like littering or wearing your mask or something like that, then it just becomes whatever. Like, it doesn't. For example, when I was in Guizhou, this park was closed. This national park, the whole thing was closed, completely closed. I went up to the security guard. I was like, "Can I go in?" He said, "No." I said, "Okay." I walked 10 feet that way, looked at him, walked in, and he just looked at me. He just stared at me, and I just kept walking. And then I got to the part where I was going to climb. I was like, "Can I go up there?" They're like, "No." I was like, "Come on, I'm making a video." And they're like, "Oh, you're making a video? Yeah, go ahead."
It's like as if they're
and I ran into that a lot in China. A lot in China, where it seems as though so much of their economy and everything else they have going on relies on a lack of enforcement. As you know, so many of their mineral mines are totally unregulated. So many of their businesses are totally unregulated. I think they really rely on the fact that the rules are there to give the perception of order, but for the most part, they thrive off letting people do whatever they want, so as long as they do not challenge the party rule.
Yeah, and so what my perception, kind of just listening to how you guys describe it, they're doing just enough at the local level to give the local bureaucrats the power, a little bit of power, enough power to make them feel strong. But they know they don't have enough power to actually, it's not like the Soviet Union style of where, the bureaucrat can just make you disappear forever. It's more of, you're making you're appeasing low level bureaucrats in a way where they think they have power, but they have no way to actualize it. So, or it's, there's too much inconvenience involved with it. And it's like, I have enough power, but at the end of the day, it's not worth my time to deal with this. Now, my worry with that would be what happens when the Chinese Communist Party decides, hey, it's about time we start actually doing this stuff. Because what I've noticed coming out of China recently is it seems as if China's kind of starting to turn back on their openness to the West, because I think they're starting to see, like you said, the Chinese Communist Party probably doesn't want a government where what you guys described goes on. And you would think at some point they're going to start cracking down on it because they have the authority, they have the power to. It's just about if, and it's just about when, in my opinion. So what do you think there's something special about the way, currently the current vibes, if you will, in China that's making it so that the government doesn't necessarily feel like now is the time? Or do you think there's something coming down the line that might make the Communist Party go, okay, this is getting a little bit out of hand, time to remind the people who's in charge?
Honestly, I think I'm going to need a little bit more time to analyze the situation.
Yeah.
Because for now, it's just been a few days. But the way I see it at this point is that they run a very, very tight propaganda ship.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very tight for the West, for everybody else. That, the stuff that leaks out in English is totally on point. Whereas the stuff that leaks out, like in Chinese, you don't see. And you don't actually see what's going on here because you wouldn't understand it. You wouldn't get it. You don't have enough context. Okay. So that's my supposition now. As I spend more time here and kind of see what's different, because there have to be different things, right? I'm going to go to different cities. I always travel to different cities when I'm here, check things out, go to the place I lived before, which is much smaller, and see if things are different there. And then that will really give me a comparison because, Shanghai's huge. It's like 23 million people. It's always been the most Western city.
Yeah.
It's still not. Like, you don't think you come over here and it's like any other place on earth. No. It's still China.
It's Western, relatively speaking, to China.
Yes, only relative to the other places around, and only in certain areas too. I mean, you go outside the main area, and it's the same as every other place. So, but honestly, no, I'm pleasantly surprised, very pleasantly surprised at the way things are over here right now. Like, there is. It's a strange amount of freedom you get over here, and I do try to impart that on people. Like, it's this weird, lawless authoritarianism.
How far are you from Beijing?
I'd say a 2-hour train ride.
So
high-speed train.
Like miles wise, you're a couple hundred.
Yeah, a couple hundred.
Okay. Yeah. So I wonder if Beijing would be any different than, because what major city are you close to? I don't know enough about China to know where you're at.
Well, the thing about Shanghai is it's also, when there is a crackdown on something like education, for example, my company about the training centers, it always rolls out in Beijing first and then Shanghai. So like we are second in the pipeline here for things that happen.
Gotcha.
Beijing is number one, of course, because it's the capital. They need to run a tight ship there, but I've never been, so I can't speak to it. I have a hard time believing it would be that much different there, besides in some certain areas. But
you would expect them to want their capital to most closely resemble what they want, what they're seeking. I would expect it might be strict a lot. It might be. I would expect it would be much different in Beijing. Shanghai is almost the Chinese gateway to the West, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. So do you think there's more Westerners in Shanghai than other parts of China?
There are the most Westerners.
Yeah. So do you think
the most Westerners here?
Do you think the foreign presence in Shanghai leads the Chinese Communist Party to be more lax with it, so people are convinced that's probably what most of China is actually like?
I'm not sure, because the thing is, what I heard in Shanghai before is they used to go into clubs and round up foreigners and drug test them. And if they tested hot for weed or something, they'd kick them out of the country. There'd be this like crackdowns against foreigners in the place with the most foreigners is how it used to work. Whereas where I used to live, like, you couldn't even imagine something like that happening. So it's almost the opposite of that from all the stories that I've heard. Is like they want to keep you. They want people to see that they're like, hey, we don't let these foreigners come in and mess around.
Do you think though maybe the Chinese Communist Party's out? They're taking a different strategy now because they're trying to compete with the West now on the global scale. Right? Before they were kind of just trying to build up. They knew they weren't competitive, but now that they're competing, they also have an incentive to give off the vibes that it's a better place to be than the West. So maybe it plays into their hand. It would play into their strategy that if they now have a desire for people to leave Shanghai and say China's not as bad as you thought it is, as you think it is, that helps them on the world scale. That helps them in the world narrative. If people can go to Shanghai and they come away saying, I went to China and it's really not that bad. I was in Shanghai and it's really not that bad. That does a lot for China on the global perception side of things. And to me, it would make sense that they would be willing to allow something like that if it worked for their benefit in the long term.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to need to go back and travel to a couple other cities to kind of verify that. But I will say for now, it is no different than basically any other city I've been to, as far as what you do, what you get away with, the kind of people you meet, the kind of food you find. It's basically so uniform as to be kind of creepy. No matter what city you're in, it kind of feels the same. So, but we'll see, right? Like I'm going to Guiyang, where I used to live in a few weeks, and apparently, from who I've talked to people on the phone from there, like officials and stuff, like, are you coming? You have to do this when you show up, and you have to do this. So they sound like they're more strict. So that's going to be fun for you guys to see. I've got some video footage as well to kind of confirm the stuff I'm saying. So that should be good for our viewers as well. But what about you guys? What's going on in the U.S.? What's I'm in a bubble now. I need help. Pull me out of it.
So, by the way, Christina asked a question. When you flew out there, did you have to get the shot first, and how long did you quarantine? Really quick.
Okay, so I did not have to get it. No, I didn't have to get the shot first, but you have to fill out a declaration that says you did get it, if you did get it, and basically just say, I promise I got it and that it isn't fake, and they don't do anything to check, really. And then I had to quarantine for 2 weeks. 2 full weeks. Technically, it's supposed to be another week, but they just let me go. Basically, they're like, don't worry about the other week. Do whatever you want. So that's just an example, that I can kind of do whatever and no one's checking up on it.
Yeah, because actually, before we move on, because I want to ask a question about another angle. Because what if it is the case that Shanghai is getting so lax because the Chinese Communist Party doesn't have the ability to enforce necessarily right now, and people are just kind of slacking off? Like, what kind of things would they do to restore that level of order, kind of deal? So that's just kind of I'm looking for an explanation as to why supposedly one of the most authoritarian regimes in the world doesn't seem that way in its second biggest city. Yeah, Bucker?
I can give you a little bit of insight. I would say, first and foremost, I think overwhelmingly the people support the party and the people believe that what the party suggests they do is good for them, and people hop on board right away. So in a lot of ways, they don't have to crack down, because if Xi Jinping walks out there and makes a suggestion, automatically massive swaths of the Chinese population hop on board with it. And they're really great at applying social pressure on each other. Really great, especially within the realm of family. When it comes to family dynamics, it's totally different than it is here. Everything you do is your family's business. The family is over at your house all the time.
So it's like an Italian family. It's like an Italian family.
Yes, it is in many ways. Like an Italian family, but they're really, really good at applying social pressure on each other. And I don't think the government needs to work very hard to get people on board. It's not like the American system where our government comes out and makes a statement and automatically, no matter what is said, half the country is going to be like, fuck you. No fucking way, man. It doesn't matter who the representative is who comes out and says it. That's kind of the American mentality, and I appreciate that mentality. But people are basically on board in China, from what I can see.
Fair enough.
And Kevin, one thing to speak a little bit more to the administrative side of your question, the top has the ability to literally sack every person. If they're not doing something they like, or if they want a little bit more enforcement, they can make it happen by saying, your job is on the line, and maybe I'll throw you in prison. Like as an official and as a bureaucrat, you have a much higher chance of going to Chinese prison than a general person does, which is kind of hilarious.
Well, I remember that was a big part of Xi Jinping's initial push and why he
The anti-corruption campaign.
Tons of support was like he told the people, "Hey, I'm going to get rid of all these corrupt bureaucrats." And to his credit, he has.
He did.
Done quite a bit.
He really does. Yeah.
What a lot of people, I think, in the West and their perception of China is we assume that of the 94% of people that aren't in the Communist Party, almost all of them are very reluctantly go along with what the Chinese Communist Party does and says. And it's like, at the end of the day, a vast majority of them are simply like, you know what? At the end of the day, I don't see any difference between this government and an American government. They're leaving me alone for the most part as of now.
And there's some historical and cultural things that play into that. Number one, if you ask an American on the street, what is the biggest threat to our country? They're going to say it's Republicans or it's Democrats, right? If you ask the Chinese what's the biggest threat to their way of life and to their success, they're going to say it's Western powers. Yep. And if you look at, they did go through what they believe was a century of humiliation, largely at the hands of European powers, but largely also at the hands of the fact that China was not unified. They had warring factions all over the country that were tearing people's lives apart in a bid for power. And once the Communist Party had their revolution and the revolution was over, they consolidated that. And China really, really values the power of national unity.
Yeah,
probably above anything else.
No, and I understand that. What's crazy to me though is it's not like, because at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself the question, look, is Chinese Communist Party, is it like a fascist or not, like authoritarian regime that's masquerading as a communist regime, or is there legitimately people within the Communist Party who are actively trying to legitimately put in place communist principles such as Xi Jinping, which would necessitate a legitimately putting the best interest of the people before anything else? Because it is not necessarily the case that they are communist, therefore it is equal to Joseph Stalin. There is the chance that the Communist Party there is doing things for the greater good of the people legitimately. It's just that, as we all know, the things you can justify for the greater good of people is endless, right? Like there's a lot of evil that can come along the way with it. So if it is the case that Xi Jinping is a good faith communist actor, as in he is legitimately trying to put forth the real principles of communism, then yes, it would make sense that politicians are actually the ones that are in most chance of going to jail. It would make sense that corruption was the first thing tackled. It would make sense that any kind of foreign threat is the first thing identified, because these are the actual legitimate threats to your party rule. And if you think that they could have detrimental effects on your culture, on your values, you'd want to keep those things away. You think it's in the best interest. If you look at the West and say, look, their freedom is good and all, but at the end of the day, it leads to hedonism, debauchery, all the degeneracy, all these things that ruin a culture. We don't want that for our people, and they also don't want that. So we are, through their tacit consent, going to forcibly make sure those things aren't allowed to come in. You get what I'm saying?
And there's another thing. I'd like to tell you what my father-in-law kind of expressed to me when I asked him. I was like, look at all these restrictions on your freedoms. things you can't do, things you can't say, activities you can't engage in China because of your government. Where here we can do these things. We have a Second Amendment. We have freedom of speech. We have freedom of the press. All these things, and no matter even though we abuse them, we cherish these freedoms. Why do you justify the Communist Party? And he told me that his mother grew up in the Chinese countryside in abject poverty, illiterate, lost all of her teeth by the time she was in her late 30s, early 40s, just basically never had a shot at success. And in one generation, he was able to not only work for the Chinese military and then get a Chinese government provided job doing geology and traveling the world, but he was able to prosper to the point that he could spend $80,000 American dollars up front to send his daughter to school in America. In one generation, they went from abject poverty to where they are today, rivaling us in economic prosperity. And they attribute that to the Communist Party. And so long as they're running on that gravy train, which has been artificially propped up by the control that the party puts on their economy, which will not last. Eventually that bubble will pop. Yeah. But as long as that gravy train is moving forward, and it is slowing down quite a bit, the people there genuinely look at They weigh 1989 in one hand, and they weigh the progress they've made in a single generation on the other, and they're willing to run with it. They don't have a good understanding of what the alternatives in the world are or where their country is headed, because they only get shown information that the government wants to show them.
1 second, because I do want to ask you a question, but I got to shut my door.
Yeah, real quick. This is the land of crazy contradictions.
Sorry about that.
Before you get in, you will find the most contradictory stuff here.
Yeah.
The longer I spend here, sometimes the less I understand. I swear.
Yeah, no. So what I wanted to get at, the thing is that because the Chinese Communist Party is the only thing they've known since China was introduced basically to the not the industrial revolution, but the corporate revolution, if you will, of like the 1940s and 50s that occurred here, like our true economic boom. The thing is to me, it doesn't seem like the people in China have an understanding of, hey, the Chinese Communist Party was able to move us from the pits of hell to where we're at now because they have because of their totalitarian nature, they have a way to force it to happen. And purely because of capitalism in the West and the values of the West, they now have all of this available to them to force upon us, if you will. Now, because of what the West is able to produce, the Chinese Communist Party can only ever keep up with the West. It will never go past the West as far as innovation goes, because it's at the end of the day, because everything is so evenly spread out and they do stick to the principles that well. I don't know if you saw the interview we had on Saturday, but Amani was talking about the fact that when she had a very successful TV show, their response was to take that money from her and give it to other show hosts, because those comrades had been around longer and they deserve some of the spoils. So they immediately took it from her, and she's like, I lost all incentive. So while it can bring you up pretty rapidly, it can only ever bring you up to the surface. You're not going to be able to actually get out of the water, if you will. If a rising tide lifts all ships, communism can only follow the tide. It can't actually set the tide. Capitalism is the moon that pulls the tide. Communism is one of the ships that's sitting in the tide, if you will. Mm-hmm. So I wonder at what point, because like Dylan said, the Chinese economy is more of a house of cards than ours is. Like a lot more of a house of cards than ours is. Just for reference, when the 2008 recession happened to us, we were sitting at about $1 trillion of commercial debt that's about what caused it. Currently, China has 8 trillion of that same debt. And they do still have a smaller GDP than us. They do still, they are rapidly trying to expand, and they are rapidly, trying to just the Chinese Communist Party, like we discussed before, builds the ghost cities so that they can continue to produce, like have something to produce. At some point, that is going to end, and at that point, I think the Chinese people are going to find out what actual communism will look like. They kind of got a taste of it through Mao at the beginning, but since Mao, there's been a lot of Chinese officials that have been like, well, we can kind of open up a little bit and our society will survive. Well, at some point, their bubble is going to collapse, and that is the point at which it's going to devolve into the same communism of the Soviet Union that you saw collapse. And at that point, what happens from there with the Chinese people?
Yeah, I think it can only go so long. The party can only, and I mean the party isn't the fun, the good, the excitement, the growth. It can only last so long until, once again, you only have a few options left. And one of those could be spreading outward and blaming everyone else, i.e. invading.
But that doesn't actually solve the... what I'm getting at is at some point, they're actually going to have to address and solve the problem somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to try to blame, but the blame's not going to work forever. At some point, they're going to have to actually try to solve it.
They're going to try. They're going to try, and it's going to be interesting to see the solutions.
They're hoping that through the belt. They're hoping that through monopolizing. They're hoping that.
Bucky's on enough of a delay right now that he's like,
yeah. They're hoping that through monopolizing certain aspects of what they see as the future economy, such as green technologies, such as AI, quantum mechanics, quantum computing, things like that, semiconductor manufacturing, that they can kind of become a major export of the high-end technologies. They're hoping that through the Belt and Road Initiative that they can engage in unfair trade practices and debt diplomacy with third world countries. And they're hoping that if they can destabilize and displace America as the world leader, that the foreign investment that the United States receives from all over the world will then come to China, and then they will be able to keep this thing going until they can figure out the next move.
Yeah, but the issue I see there is that at some point the Chinese, like the Chinese Communist Party cannot keep holding the bubble down. It just cannot. And at some point that bubble is going to burst. And when it bursts, it is going to be so catastrophic that China as a country is going to kind of shrivel up. It's not going to be, they're so heavy in recession that foreign investment doesn't look, it's going to be so bad that it's going to just confirm all the things that have kept foreign investment out of China for so long. There's a reason why they have to beg for investment. It's because everyone with an ounce of intellectual honesty that looks at China says, no, we have no way of knowing anything about you. All of the numbers that come out of there, we know are going to be fudged to make you look better. We have no idea what your realistic actual numbers are. And then when it finally collapses, and it collapses with the weight of the 7 recessions that they've held back, it's going to create, what's going to happen is you're going to lose the Western incentive to focus on China as a future investment pool, if you will. So what you're going to see happen is when the billion people in China lose all the buying power that they have because of the Chinese Communist Party's collapse, all of a sudden ESPN is going to stop catering to China, Disney's going to stop catering to China, WB is going to stop catering to China. All of our cultural assets that China has found so integral in their plan to take over or destroy the American culture, they're going to lose the money incentive of catering to China, and it's going to remove so it's going to cause a series of dominoes that are going to leave China with the Chinese Communist Party in a position of, I guess we're going to have to go full Stalin here or full Mao again.
They're either going to have to exploit their own people, or they're going to have to find another people to exploit. And what is really going to make a difference is what the heads of the Bank of International Settlements and other central banks around the world decide they want to prop up, because those who control this world's money supply and how money is funneled into economies really can wreck or prop up any economy they want.
They're looking for the first excuse to they're real quick. They're looking for the first excuse to get rid of China from all of this stuff. Their hand has been forced in allowing China into things such as the UN Security Council and stuff like that. Their hand has basically been forced on the China front. So don't be surprised that they're going to look for the first available opportunity to try to ditch China if they can.
They're going to look for the first available opportunity to cozy up with whatever government has the monopoly of force on the world stage.
Well, here's the thing:
if we lose that because China is able to develop the high-end AI and drone technologies and 5G stations around the world that will basically make modern and old school military warfare obsolete. The bankers are going to side with whoever has a monopoly on force.
Let me put it this way for you. Let me change the approach angle on this one. China has one of the oldest cultures on planet Earth. I've mentioned that before. It also has such a humongous population that has potential inventors, investors, and entrepreneurs, future potential contributors to the world. The thing is every single person that's at the high level economically looks at China and says, if only they had the American capitalist system, the value of China would increase. The value of the average Chinese person to the average American business would blow up. They want China's Communist Party to fail because if you can replace what they have with a capitalist government, the amount of economic opportunity that would come from China is out of this world, because the main thing the Communist Party does is stifle any and all innovation.
And I understand that, and part of that also lends itself to military advancement. Obviously, so long as we have Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk leading the world in space technologies, we're going to have a massive advantage. And they don't have the equivalent over there in China. I mean, they have their Jack Ma and others, and they are making tremendous strides with their space program, but not like American private companies that are pushing the boundaries of space exploration and space technologies. And I think that really will be the key to future warfare.
Kevin, I think it's funny you're using the leftist argument here, which is, essentially the CIA wants to destabilize everyone who won't be a good capitalist producer.
No. I'm not. That's not my angle at all. I'm saying, like, if you're an investor, if you want to actually make a true investment in China and you want to make the most money possible, you want the Chinese Communist Party gone, because as much as China has grown, are you going to make the argument that communism is better for economic prosperity than capitalism is?
Well, no, this is the point. This is what the leftists say. I think that's why the CIA doesn't want. This is their argument, right? Every socialism doesn't work because capitalists don't want it to work argument is basically predicated upon the same thing, which I don't necessarily think is wrong.
Look,
but I also
socialism,
don't think there's a cabal of capitalists who are like, yeah, we're going to turn everybody into a beautiful economic agent. But then again, you see Davos and you're kind of like, well, maybe they are thinking like that. Huh.
No. Like at the end of the day, like the IMF is incredibly free market. Like they have, when you look at the IMF's requirements or the World Bank's requirements, when states when states request loans, like you have to, their number one step is, all right, chop your government in half. Let's go. Like government goes first. The next one is free trade comes next. Open trade. Tariffs are gone. They're incredibly free. When I look at how their actual operating practices are, you get a sense of what they think is going to lead to the most money, because that's what they want in the end. They want the most money. If China being communist would make them the most money, they would be encouraging China to remain communist. They would be working to make sure China remain communist. If us being socialist would make the most money and lead to the most prosperity, they would be gunning for that, because like we said, a rising tide sinks all ships or lifts all ships. You want that tide as high as possible, right?
So do you guys think the IMF, who is it really composed of? Whose interest? Do you think it's just the individual interests of stateless bankers trying to enrich themselves?
Oh, dude, it's such a clusterfuck of just like gross, corrupt, rich, hedge fund managers and defense contractors and
Defense contractors.
like global ambassadors and all these like it's a hegemonic mess of just rich, powerful elites that they control a lot of money. And when
The Illuminati, basically.
yeah, if there was a force that could act similar to the Illuminati, you would find it within the UN, you would find it within the IMS, you would find it within Davos, at their World Economic Forums and stuff like that. The World Economic Forum, if you want to know who the Illuminati is, just look at the guest list at the World Economic Forum.
Well, everyone's been making that argument, especially since the whole Great Reset thing came out, which is hilarious.
No, all you got to do is just ask yourself the question. If it is the case that there is a secret cabal of rich billionaires that are trying to control the economy, where would they be? Where would they be?
It's not very secret. They literally say, like, we're going to gather up the richest and the most powerful people, put them in a room, and brainstorm for the future and prosperity of humanity. You will own nothing and eat bugs.
It's like they don't need to meet in secret underneath in a bunker, an 1870s bunker underneath.
None of that.
No, none of that is necessary in the slightest. When like, oh yeah, let's just go. Let's actually tell everyone what we're doing. World Economic Forum. What is the what would comprise the World Economic Forum? The world economic elites. But so it's like, if you want to know, seriously though, I need some beer.
If you want to take everything from you, man.
If you want to know where the elites are, you just look at where the elites would be. And so it's like,
right, and it would make sense that they want to prop up any government that is going to allow the companies that these financiers are investing in to do whatever they want, do whatever it takes to make them money.
Also, you want to know why I hate Dan Crenshaw? He's on the guest list of the World Economic Forum. So, like, it's like, these are of course, the people you think it would be are the people it is. And it's like, when I talk to people about this, I'm like, it's not as if they all meet, like, necessarily that they all meet at one time and decide what their plan for the world is. It's these people are rich, they're powerful, they control a lot of assets. And what happens is, when you control a lot of assets and you need to transfer those assets or use those assets, you call people who would be able to allow you to do that. And so it's not conspiracy theory. It's like, who are rich people going to call when they need help? They're going to call other rich people. They're going to call other powerful people, other politically powerful people. Like, of course, when you're at that level, you have to talk to people at that level. So they're going to be interconnected in that way. It's like, these things aren't secret. These things aren't secret. It's people just think that they're secret. It's like why I don't believe in all these conspiracy theories, because I'm like, dude, they don't have to meet in freaking whatever the Grove is. They did, and there's some weirdness to that. But at the end of the day, they don't need to be meeting in Bohemian Grove, Bohemian Rhapsody, great song by Queen. Please don't flag me, YouTube. When they're singing the Bohemian Rhapsody in their robes, it's completely unnecessary when they can meet in suits and ties in Davos, Switzerland for a giant, and people will celebrate the great economic minds coming together. Like,
yeah,
it's these people. So they do have a vested economic interest in a China that isn't ruled by the Chinese Communist Party, because what that means is, if China is ruled by Democrats, well, a democratic, as we all know, the representatives in Republican democratic systems are much easier to bribe than the Chinese Communist Party would probably be. And you can make a lot more money doing it, because at the end of the day, what do you also have if that's the case? What they really want is property in China to go from owned by the state to private, so they can buy it all up. And you can't do that if the Chinese Communist Party is there.
Dude, you were just like, you're like, she's going to be reading this later and be like, perfect. He's
I've been wondering the same thing. Like, is there a global cabal?
Media?
Is there a global cabal of Western banking and corporate and military powers that want to dominate the globe? And has the Communist Party in China been the good guys all along? I don't know. You make up your own mind. Are they the rogue state that's going to bring down the New World Order? I don't know.
Dude, my social credit score is going so up. Thank you, guys. Listen to me.
Thanks for listening to the compliance report. Like and subscribe.
But it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, all you have to do is look at this stuff objectively and honestly. It would make, it makes sense that people who want to make money want the Chinese Communist Party gone, because if it is the case that it is because the Chinese Communist Party that people rose to prosperity so quickly from what they were at, and you think capitalism is an even more prosperous ideal, because the argument would have to be which system would have gotten them there faster. If you truly believe in capitalism, I don't think capitalism actually, no, I do think capitalism necessarily would have made things even better, right? I think the last, since the 1970s, if they went full capitalist, it would have been even better. They would be even more prosperous, because again, there's so much potential buying power in that country that if the Chinese Communist Party did not control all economics and all property in that country, every major hedge fund in the world would be going after it. For every single venture capital fund, every single investment firm would be searching that country, right? Why do you think India is getting so much business? But India's got its own problems. I don't know enough about why India's economy is the way it is. So I'm going to ignore India for now. But
I don't know shit about India.
Talking specifically in this case, maybe it is the case that only communism could have gotten them from the base level to decent. But once they reached that level, capitalism would have been the better choice. Who knows? All I know is these hedge fund managers all know that capitalism is the reason why they have so much money.
Right.
However, not full-blown free trade. They want a crony capitalist system, and they're also learning that the Chinese Communist Party is not very receptive of crony capitalism.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they haven't been screwing around. They took Tencent and Alibaba. They took like tens of billions of their dollars, and they basically pointed a finger at them and they said, "You're going to provide those profits for the common good, and you're going to do it willingly." And then they looked at them, and the companies the next day were like, "Okay."
Yeah. Hence why,
right. It's kind of badass a little bit.
Hence why BlackRock has to beg people to invest in China, because at the end of the day, it is not investment friendly, and there's 1.3 billion people there.
I'd rather see BlackRock go down than the CCP. I'm going to say it right now. If I had to string a bunch of people from up by their toes, I'm not going to say what I wanted to say. It would definitely be like BlackRock execs over.
Let me put it this way: if you explain to a person the goals of the Chinese Communist Party and the goals of BlackRock, I could understand why someone would say, you know what, I think I'm going to go with the communism.
Seriously, dude.
I can't think of anyone, capitalist or not, that would be like, yeah, you know what, I'm in support of you controlling almost all the wealth and buying up all the property and forcing me to live for only being able to rent and never own. Yeah, you know what, I actually prefer that over the system that says the opposite.
That's great. We're going to support that. We're going to vote that in, dude. Like, just look at the original communist revolution here. It was pretty badass when you think about it. Like, people had been feudal serfs for like hundreds of years, and they were like, let's just go hang the landlord. Screw this. Let's take his house. And
I like how progressive we're getting here, guys. I was just going to say, I saw an infographic about how much money Jeff Bezos has. And how like it like put together this graph, and it was like every square is $1 billion, and it had like Kanye West is like 6.5 billion, and he's like way down at the bottom.
He's not 6.5 billion.
Jeff Bezos is like 190 billion or something like that, and then like everybody else is like way down. There's nothing. They have nothing, right? And it does make you wonder, like, is there? I know we're a pretty libertarian crew here. Is there an amount of money that is just out of hand?
No, because the real question to ask is, okay, so what about Jeff Bezos' employees? Did all of them end up making more money as a result of Jeff Bezos making more money? The answer is yes. Jeff Bezos pays $15 an hour for a job that used to be like $5 an hour, guys. Like, warehouse worker at Amazon pays really good money compared to other jobs that are of the same ilk. So like the question that never gets asked is like, what about the employees? Look at Google. All the money Google made, their employees make buku fucking bucks working for Google. Like at the end of the day, Jeff Bezos, capitalists doing nothing but hoarding the money means that nobody has any money to buy their products.
They're not very good capitalists if they're hoarding money.
Yeah, because you need people to buy your products. You only get money at the voluntary, like, because people want to give it to you. And like, here's the thing. Yeah, the money should be a zero-sum game. There should be a finite of money amount in the system, so every company's goal is to get as much of that for them. They're constantly trying to convince you why your money is better spent with them than with someone else. And so, at the end of the day, Jeff Bezos having more money means that he provided that much value to my life, right? I bought something on Amazon that was big and bulky the other day, and I got it the next day. That used to take 4 to 8 weeks, if not longer. Like, to Jeff Bezos making that much money, that's in a capitalist system, that just says that's how much value he provided to us. So if you're a true libertarian, no, there is no amount of gross money that someone has, because at the end of the day, the only thing that means is that that's how much they provided a service that is worth that much to the people.
Now, how much money do you think he puts into infiltrating and influencing the political process in the media?
Well, he bought the Washington Post, so that much at least. Amazon Prime makes its own content. You can see in their documentaries. So
this is where it gets a little sketchy when you're like, okay, when someone does have this amount of money, like, can they just buy their way into being your overlord in other domains of life that reach outside of Amazon?
No, without the military.
Yeah, we have the military, but we also have shit tons of private contractors who, work for basically the arms industry, who have their own little CEO, Jeff Bezos guys, with their own interests only being financial as well. So it's like, I don't know. I really wish we could decouple the military from the military industrial complex in a way that made it so it wasn't a profit weapons producing incentive to put us certain places. Like,
that's impossible to do, because soldiers need weapons, soldiers need ammo, soldiers need equipment, soldiers need food, soldiers need water. Like, soldiers need things. As long as soldiers need things, someone has to produce things. Unless you're going to make it a communist system, you have to pay someone for those things. What the problem is that we have gone from this idea of a a small defensive military whose only purpose is to just protect us from enemies, to a small force whose goal is to seek enemies out around the world and take the battle to them. That is not defensive. For example, right? Like, and it's spread by it's an idea that's spread by the military-industrial complex, and it runs deep. For example, today I was listening to the Ben Shapiro's interview with Condoleezza Rice from this last weekend. Literally, the first thing out of that woman's mouth is a bold-faced lie about why we were in Afghanistan in the first place. Her first claim was we're in Afghanistan because we were seeking out, because the planning for 9/11 took place in Afghanistan and we were going after the planners. That is literally not true. The planning that took place mostly took place in Hamburg, Germany. Took place a little bit over in Malaysia. There was planning done in America and Canada. Like, a lot of this stuff, none of this stuff took place in Afghanistan. None of the perpetrators were members of the Taliban. The Taliban came right out and tried to give Osama bin Laden to us. They sent their defense. They have, at the time in 2001, before 9/11, the Taliban actually had like a foreign ambassador, because they were a regime at the time, technically. So they had a foreign ambassador who came to the United States and said, hey, look, this dude is in our mountains. We don't fucking want him there. He's planning an attack on your soil. We know if he's successful, you're going to bring your military in. Can you please go get him beforehand? And he was ignored. So, like, it is such a bold-faced lie right on its front, and it's because at the end of the day, we have a military-industrial complex that has been able to that also has connections within the media. Like I said, it's like a tight-knit group. Journalists have friends everywhere, and journalists want to have ins everywhere. And these politicians and these rich people love to be able to get their voice out. It's all about PR and communication with the public. So they build up good relationships with journalists who were supposed to be journalists but are now activists. And so, because of all these deep running ties that go between our politics, our media, and our corporations, it creates a system that where things like the military industrial complex are able to grow to unimaginable levels because everybody profits off of them. everybody profits off of them that they care about. And so, yeah, no, I agree with you, Lucky. They are directly trying to control. There is an element of them trying to control us. Like they want to have, there's an ideal temperament that you want out of your population that makes governance really easy, and that's the kind of temperament they're trying to get, and that's the kind of temperament they're trying to cultivate, and that's the kind of temperament that America was founded to fight off, and that's the problem they're running into. Yep.
Right. And I think in the U.S., we're the only ones really with the privilege of being able to say we want to have a defensive libertarian army and leave it at that, because, we're so isolated geographically. After World War II, the French and West Germany and all these people, they had to deal with Moscow right on their freaking doorstep, right? Like, yeah. And even still, Western Europe doesn't have the privilege of being like, they still rely on American power, first off, with NATO to be a bulwark to that, just like the rest of Southeast Asia and East Asia relies on American power to be a bulwark to China. All these other nations don't have the liberty of being able to say, we just want to back off and have an easygoing defensive army with a libertarian society. But in the U.S., we actually do have that because of our geography. Like, Mexico is not going to become a threat anytime soon, and neither is Canada. And any sort of large-scale invasion from a hostile foreign power is basically impossible. The furthest anyone ever got in the 20th century was the Japanese invading the Aleutian Chain in Alaska. So, there is some credence to saying maybe we should gut the military-industrial complex and just have a defensive army like this. But that is the sort of abandonment to tyrannical powers of places like Western Europe and Japan and South Korea and our allies, that right now, basically, their only bulwark against the powers that be around them, which want to take over things and which want to be aggressive, is us at the moment. And whether we have the military-industrial complex or not, that remains the truth, that we do flex might in these areas that these other armies, they should have gotten their shit together by now. I'll say that much.
Why don't they pay a subscription fee? Like, hey, we have a base. We charge $1 billion per year for every military base you want here. Do you want us providing your defense?
Hey, Taiwan, pay for our health care. We'll call it even.
No, pay us $1 billion. We'll pay us.
Bernie Sanders is happy. George Bush is happy.
How about this?
We're all happy.
Whatever the total cost to run the base is, plus 25% is how much they have to pay. Hey, we actually make money on that.
Would you like to renew?
No, but like seriously, that would be the best. That would honestly be the capitalist model of a military. Like, because then countries would have the ability to say, "Hey, America, we want to pay to have you in here." And then at that point, if you're charging cost to run plus 25%, you're actually making a profit on your military at that point.
Speaking of capitalism, why didn't we just hire Jeff Bezos to get our people out of Afghanistan? It would have been done weeks ago.
Seriously,
it would have been 2-day delivery.
Yeah, seriously, like we got free 1-day shipping on your freedom. Freedom and free 1-day shipping.
I have to go. I have a class in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You guys can continue. But I really like it.
I think we're wrapping it up here, but thanks for tuning in, man. Keep in touch.
Hey, Cole, I just want to say we're really glad you're enjoying China. You're full-time employed in China. You're spending all of your money in China. And that you join us every week to let us know how that's working out for you.
Yeah. All right.
We'll see
guys,
how things shape up around here, guys.
I'm glad you could just destroy any credibility the Liberty Revolt had.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
What I'm here for.
Hey, thank you all so much for watching tonight. I think this was a pretty great talk. So,
we had fun. We had fun.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our videos.
Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, go to Facebook and like and follow. If you're watching on Facebook, go to YouTube and subscribe. I think YouTube and Instagram have been shadow banning us. Kevin, I swear to God, at one point we had like 600 followers on Instagram. We have like 100 something now. Yeah, I haven't done anything different.
Well, there's been a lot of inactivity, but it's, but at the same time, there's also
inactivity is not a reason to unsubscribe from a meme page. Because when they're not posting anything, you don't see them. You only unsubscribe to a meme page when the memes suck. And I'm telling you, our memes don't suck. Instagram.com/Liberty Revolt Media.
Fair enough. Hey, well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I hope we give you guys a good conversation to listen to. If you enjoyed it, please tell your friends. Please, please consider sharing this video with a couple of your friends. Once it goes live on YouTube, please consider going to Facebook and just inviting some of your friends to like the page. We really, really, really appreciate the support on that.
That's the one. If we could have one person every time we go live, go to our Facebook page, go to the button where it says invite your friends, and just run down the list and hit a handful of people you think might be interested in this content or might be interested in the comment section. We're always looking for people like Lucky Lucado to sit there and eye roll us and own us with one word responses throughout the course of our entire show.
We appreciate you.
It really does make it better. And we love you guys. Have the most wonderful day. Drive fast, take chances.